Welcome to the deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
Today we're diving into something pretty fascinating.
Right.
The connection between early modern Italian caricature and a cultural obsession with monsters.
Right.
So picture this.
I'm picturing it.
16th and 17th century Italy.
Mm-hmm.
Now we think of the Renaissance, all the beauty and everything.
Absolutely.
But there was also this craze for strange and marvelous things.
Okay.
So our sources for this deep dive
Yeah.
are going to be academic excerpts that focus on art history and the history of science.
Gotcha.
And what we want to uncover here is how these two seemingly opposite trends, exaggerated comical art and creatures that sparked fear and wonder, were actually deeply intertwined.
Interesting.
So it's a connection that might surprise you.
It is.
But as we go through these sources, you'll see how these two threads, caricature and monsters, reflect a shared fascination with distorting the human form, playing with boundaries, and challenging conventional ways of seeing.
I like it.
Okay, so let's start with the birth of caricature itself.
Okay.
Like, where do we even begin?
Well, our journey begins in Bologna, Italy.
Okay.
Home to the Carracci brothers.
Okay.
And their revolutionary art academy, the Accademia degli Incaminati.
Oh, wow.
And they were all about pushing artistic boundaries.
Okay.
And they encouraged their students to embrace lusus.
Lusus.
Which is Latin for play.
Play in an art academy.
Exactly.
That sounds fun.
Yeah. So the Carraccis believed that play was crucial for developing artistic skill. They encouraged experimentation.
Okay.
And that included exploring caricature.
So now when we think of caricature today, you probably picture those funny, exaggerated portraits. Like, those caricatures you get at amusement parks that make your nose look huge and your chin super pointy.
Exactly. But back then, caricature had a broader meaning.
Okay.
It wasn't just about capturing a likeness. It included lampooning different types of people, social stereotypes, even fictional characters.
Okay.
And it wasn't always about humor. It was about using distortion to make a point, to spark conversation, or to challenge the way people saw the world.
So deeper meaning behind those distorted faces and exaggerated features.
Yeah.
It wasn't just about getting a laugh.
It wasn't just for a laugh.
Precisely.
One of the Carracci students, Guercino,
Okay.
really took this idea and ran with it.
Okay.
He created these incredible, grotesque drawings
Oh, wow.
that blurred the lines between caricature and
Great.
depictions of monsters.
That's where it starts to get really interesting.
Right.
But I have to ask,
Sure.
before we go into the monster mania,
Yeah.
were these early caricatures popular?
Well, did people appreciate
Because humor is subjective,
Yeah.
and what people find funny changes over time.
Right.
But what we can say for certain
Okay.
is that the Carracci and their students sparked a movement.
Okay.
They paved the way for caricature to become a powerful form of artistic expression.
So while the Carracci brothers were busy revolutionizing art with their playful approach to caricature,
Right.
what was going on with the monster craze?
So it's fascinating to trace
Okay.
how the perception of monsters evolved over time in the Middle Ages.
Yeah.
Monsters were primarily viewed through a religious lens,
Okay.
symbolizing divine power, God's wrath,
Okay.
or the temptations of the flesh.
Okay.
But as we move into the Renaissance, there's a shift. So instead of fearing monsters as symbols of sin or punishment, people started to see them differently.
Exactly.
Oh, boy.
Monsters became objects of fascination and wonder.
Okay.
They were still a bit scary,
Yeah.
but they also sparked curiosity and inspired awe.
Okay.
Perfect example of this shift
Okay.
is the Sacrobosco Garden
Okay.
at Bomarzo.
Okay.
Think of it like a 16th century amusement park,
All right.
full of bizarre and fantastical sculptures.
Wow. I can only imagine what that must have been like.
Yeah.
It sounds like a cross between a Renaissance garden and a modern-day haunted house.
It was designed to evoke a sense of both horror and delight,
Okay.
and it perfectly captures this changing attitude toward the monstrous.
Yeah.
It wasn't just about fearing the unknown anymore.
Right.
It was about embracing the strange and marvelous.
Yeah. So this fascination with monsters wasn't just about art and gardens.
Right.
There was also this whole pseudoscience that tried to connect people's looks with their personalities.
Right. Right.
What was it called again?
Physiognomy.
Physiognomy.
And it was incredibly popular during this period.
Okay.
The idea was that you could analyze someone's facial features, body shape, even the way they walked.
Okay.
To reveal their character, their intelligence, and even their morality.
So basically judging a book by its cover.
You could say that.
But with faces. Did they have like a guidebook for this?
One early example is Johannes Eben Dagen's book, which was packed with woodcuts of different faces and detailed explanations of what each feature supposedly revealed about a person's character.
Wow.
For example, he claimed that sunken eyes meant you were malicious, and bulging eyes meant you were not the sharpest tool in the shed.
It sounds like he was laying the groundwork for caricature artists.
Right.
But wasn't there like a bigger name in physiognomy? Someone who really took this idea and popularized it.
Giambattista Della Porta.
Della Porta.
Yeah.
Okay.
His book, De Humana Physiognomonia, was a bestseller.
Wow.
It went through countless editions and really solidified the influence of physiognomy on popular culture.
And here's where the connection to caricature starts to become really clear, right?
You got it.
Della Porta didn't just describe these connections between looks and personality.
He didn't.
He actually showed them.
And his illustrations were key.
Okay.
He took this idea of linking humans to animals and ran with it visually.
Okay.
Imagine seeing drawings of people whose features were exaggerated to resemble different animals.
Okay, I'm picturing it, and it sounds both fascinating and a little bit creepy.
It is.
So give us some examples. What kind of animal comparisons did he make?
Well, he had quite a range.
Okay.
For instance, if you had a hooked nose, it meant you were magnanimous and noble, just like an eagle, the king of birds. But if your toes were close together, well, that suggested you were sneaky and deceitful like a pig.
Wow, okay.
And get this. Bowed legs were a sign of being effeminate.
Okay.
But Della Porta put a positive spin on it, claiming that it also signified tranquility and modesty.
So he was finding the silver lining in those less than ideal features.
Exact.
Even if his comparisons were a little bit out there.
Right.
And what's crucial here is that by making these visual connections between humans and animals, Della Porta was, in a way, normalizing the monstrous.
Yeah.
He was showing that these unusual features weren't entirely separate from the natural world.
Yeah.
So it's like he was blurring the lines between the human and the animal,
exactly,
making the strange seem more familiar.
Yeah.
And this idea had a profound impact on artists like Agostino Carracci, who drew inspiration from Della Porta's work to create incredible images like eaglemen and a series of heads morphing into a snarling beast.
That's right.
Now, that's what I call pushing the boundaries of art.
Exactly.
So we have caricature evolving from playful experimentation to a form of social commentary. And we have this shift in how people view monsters, moving from fear to fascination.
Yeah.
But what I find really intriguing is that all of this was happening during a time of incredible advancements in medicine.
Absolutely. This was a period of remarkable scientific discovery. Anatomy was taking off. And doctors were gaining a much deeper understanding of how the body worked.
So enter the monsters.
Exactly.
Right.
Think about Andreas Vesalius' groundbreaking book on anatomy. It was filled with incredibly detailed illustrations that revolutionized the field. As doctors became more adept at understanding the ideal body, they also became more intrigued by birth defects, which led to the emergence of teratology.
Teratology. That's a new one for me. What exactly is that?
Teratology is the study of abnormalities, particularly congenital ones. It's about understanding those variations and complexities of the human body that deviate from the norm.
So instead of just fearing or dismissing monsters,
Precisely.
Scientists started studying them.
Exactly.
This is all so fascinating. But before we get too deep into the world of teratology, I think we need to take a closer look at those monster books. You mentioned earlier. What kind of stories were they telling? And who are the key figures behind them?
So these early monster books were kind of like the precursors to today's medical journals, but with a much more sensational flair.
I can imagine.
One of the pioneers was Ambroise Paré, a renowned surgeon. His book tried to bridge the gap between the supernatural and the natural.
Okay.
Seeking explanations for birth defects.
Right.
In both divine will
Yeah.
and the workings of the human body.
So he was straddling that line between science and superstition.
Exactly.
Trying to make sense of these unusual births in a way that people could understand at the time.
Yeah. But then you have these two powerhouses of monster literature.
Okay.
Fortunio Liceti
Okay.
and Ulisse Aldrovandi.
All right.
Liceti was fascinating.
Okay.
He argued that monsters were lusus naturae.
Lusus naturae.
Which translates to jokes of nature.
Jokes of nature.
Yeah.
That's a curious way to describe birth defects.
It might sound strange to us now.
Yeah.
But Liceti believed that these unusual births weren't mistakes or signs of divine displeasure.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, he saw them as evidence of nature's creativity.
Okay.
Her ability to play with form and function. It was as if nature was an artist.
Okay.
Constantly experimenting and pushing the boundaries of creation.
So he was celebrating the diversity of life, even in its most unusual forms.
Yes.
What about Aldrovandi?
Aldrovandi was like the encyclopedia compiler of the monstrous.
Oh, wow. Okay.
His book, Monstrum Historia, was a massive compendium of everything from birth defects to mythical creatures.
Wow.
He meticulously documented and illustrated a vast array of strange and wondrous beings, further cementing the idea of nature as a playful artist.
Yeah.
Constantly pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
These books sound like they were full of incredible stories.
They were.
Can you give us a taste?
Oh, yeah.
What kind of creatures did they document?
They documented cases that would make your jaw drop.
Okay.
Liceti wrote about Octavia Riparolia.
Okay.
A girl born with eyes on the back of her head.
Oh, wow.
Imagine that.
That's wild.
There was even a painting commissioned of her for a cardinal.
Wow.
Then there was a boy with two faces.
Okay.
Resembling the Roman god Janus.
Oh, wow.
And get this.
Okay.
That case was documented by Leonardo da Vinci himself.
Leonardo da Vinci.
Yeah.
The Renaissance man himself was fascinated by these cases.
That's right.
That just shows you how widespread this interest in the unusual was.
It truly does.
And we can't forget the infamous monster of Ravenna.
Right.
A dragon-like creature.
Right.
That was actually inspired by a real birth defect.
Yeah.
Further blurring the lines between reality and fantasy.
Exactly.
These stories captivated the public imagination.
Yeah.
Fueling a fascination with the strange and wonderful.
Absolutely.
It's like nature was putting on a show and everyone was eager to watch.
Yeah.
But while nature was creating these monsters for kicks,
right,
artists were also playing with distortion and exaggeration in their caricatures. It's as if they were in a playful competition with nature.
Yeah.
Pushing the boundaries of representation.
That's a fantastic observation.
It's like they were saying, hey, nature, look what we can do too.
Right.
They were both engaged in this creative dance.
Yeah.
Exploring the limits of form and challenging conventional ideas of beauty. It makes you wonder if some people were concerned by this fascination with the grotesque.
Yeah.
Was there any pushback against this trend?
Well, there were certainly contrasting viewpoints.
Yeah.
Remember St. Bernard back in the Middle Ages?
Yeah.
Who was annoyed by all the monstrous imagery in churches?
Yeah, he found it distracting and inappropriate.
Right.
And even during the Renaissance, some people preferred to focus on classical ideals of beauty and harmony.
That makes sense.
The Renaissance was all about balance and proportion.
Right.
So how did they reconcile this love of beauty with their fascination with the grotesque?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
It wasn't about choosing one over the other. It was about acknowledging both the beautiful and the grotesque as essential parts of the human experience, reflecting the complexities and contradictions of life itself.
So it's this tension between the two that makes this period so fascinating.
Yeah.
But all of this focus on monsters' ugliness and deformity.
Was there also a desire for the opposite?
Absolutely.
Longing for ideal beauty.
Alongside those monster books, there were also books on how to fix ugliness.
Okay.
Treatises on skin diseases.
Okay.
Guides to cosmetics. And even early attempts at plastic surgery.
Well, plastic surgery back then?
I know.
That's wild.
Yeah.
What kind of procedures were they doing?
Believe it or not.
Yeah.
One of the pioneers of plastic surgery was Gaspar Tagliacozzi.
Tagliacozzi.
Yeah.
Okay.
He specialized in nose reconstructions.
Okay.
Which were especially sought after by wealthy men who had lost their noses in duels.
Oh, wow.
A common occurrence back then.
So nose jobs for dueling injuries.
Pretty much.
That's a piece of history I never learned in school.
Right.
But it highlights this fascinating tension between the allure of the grotesque and the pursuit of ideal beauty.
Right.
Which played out in both the scientific and artistic realms.
It's like two sides of the same coin.
And this push and pull, this fascination with both extremes, fueled a lot of the creative and intellectual experimentation of the time.
We've talked about the artists, the scientists, and the authors who contributed to this cultural phenomenon.
Right.
But what about the everyday people? How did they experience this obsession with the monstrous?
Imagine yourself walking through a bustling Italian piazza.
Okay.
You see street vendors hawking broadsheets.
Okay.
With sensational headlines and illustrations of bizarre creatures.
Wow, okay.
You overhear conversations about monstrous births and fantastical beasts.
Okay.
These stories weren't just confined to scholarly books. They were circulating in the streets, in taverns, and around dinner tables.
So it was like a real-life version of today's social media.
Exactly.
With everyone sharing and commenting on the latest sensational stories.
Right.
And those stories weren't just for entertainment.
They weren't.
They sparked debate and discussion.
It did.
Shaping people's beliefs and anxieties about the world around them.
Right.
I can only imagine the heated arguments that must have erupted in those taverns.
Oh, yeah.
Were these creatures seen as signs from God? Warnings of impending doom, or simply curiosities of nature?
It probably depended on who you asked.
Yeah.
Some people might have interpreted these unusual births as divine messages, while others might have seen them as evidence of nature's capriciousness.
Okay.
And this diversity of interpretations is reflected in the art of the time.
Okay.
Particularly in the development of caricature.
So caricature wasn't just a form of entertainment.
Exactly.
It was a reflection of the anxieties, beliefs, and curiosities of the people.
Right.
Artists weren't working in a vacuum. They were responding to the cultural climate.
Yeah.
Using caricature to comment on, satirize, and explore the complexities of their world.
Right.
Much like we see in art today.
Exactly.
This has been such an eye-opening exploration.
It has.
We've journeyed from the playful experiments of the Karachi brothers to the scientific inquiries of teratology.
Right.
And we've seen how the fascination with monsters seeped into every corner of society.
Yeah.
From scholarly treatises to street corner gossip.
It did.
But I'm curious, where do we go from here?
That's a great question.
What else can we glean from this deep dive into the intertwined worlds of caricature and monsters?
Whoa.
We've been on quite an adventure through 16th and 17th century Italy.
Huh?
Who knew that playful caricatures and tales of strange creatures could reveal so much about the culture and the way people thought back then?
It's truly remarkable how these seemingly disparate elements, art science, popular culture, all come together to tell a larger story.
Yeah.
It speaks volumes about the power of visual imagery, whether it's a caricature that makes us laugh, a fantastical sculpture that inspires awe, or even a simple woodcut in a broadsheet that sparks our curiosity.
And it makes you realize that our fascination with the unusual, the grotesque, the monstrous, it's not just a product of modern media.
It's not.
It's something that's been with us for centuries.
Absolutely. And I think it speaks to a fundamental human need to explore boundaries, to question norms, and to make sense of the world around us, even those aspects that might seem strange or unsettling.
So if we could distill all of this down to one key takeaway, what would it be? Okay. What do you hope our listener will walk away with after this deep dive?
I think the most important thing to remember is that the history of art and the history of science are not separate, isolated fields.
Okay.
They're constantly informing and influencing each other, reflecting and shaping the cultural anxieties, curiosities, and beliefs of their time.
It's like they're two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
Each providing a unique perspective on the human experience. And sometimes the most surprising connections emerge from those unexpected intersections. Who would have thought that a playful caricature and a tale of a monstrous birth could reveal so much about how people saw the world hundreds of years ago?
It's a reminder that history is full of surprises.
Yeah.
And that even the seemingly bizarre or trivial details can offer profound insights into the human condition.
Okay, before we wrap up, I have one last question for you.
Okay.
Imagine you could commission a caricature from a 17th century artist.
Oh.
What animal do you think they would use to represent you?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
Yeah. Yeah.
It would be fascinating to see what those artists would pick up on.
Yeah.
What features they would choose to highlight and exaggerate.
Right.
I suppose it depends on which physiognomy guide they were consulting.
Right.
Maybe a wise old owl, symbolizing knowledge and insight.
Okay.
Or perhaps a sly fox representing wit and cunning.
Okay.
What about you?
Honestly, I'm stumped.
Yeah.
I'd probably have to spend some time studying those old physiognomy books to get a better sense of what each animal represented.
Yeah.
It's a question that really gets you thinking about how people saw themselves and others back then, and how those perceptions have evolved over time.
That's the beauty of history, isn't it?
Yeah.
It not only sheds light on the past, but also prompts us to reflect on the present and consider how our own perceptions and beliefs are shaped by the cultural currents of our time.
Well said.
Thank you.
Thanks for taking us on this incredible journey into the world of caricature and monsters.
Yeah.
It's been an eye-opening experience.
The pleasure was all mine.
For everyone listening, thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Yes, thank you.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning.
Keep diving.
And keep diving deep.